Anytime there is an opportunity to talk about the environment, I'm always very keenly interested because it's an area where I practice and I have an abiding interest in knowing what happens in the environment, especially in the Niger Delta. And before we start our conversation this morning, I would like to bring into the conversation some information from very recent publications that I did, and this paper was just published was released on the 5th of June, marking the World Environment Day. It is about the Niger Delta, and the paper is focused on the environmental hazards and deteriorating environmental quality that we find in the Niger Delta. And from this publication, we find that the Niger Delta has witnessed a gradual but very intense deterioration in air quality of the geophysical environment since the commencement of the exploration and exploitation of oil and gas resources in the region for about 7 decades. And that it is estimated that Nigeria flares about 70 million tons of gas daily, which is 19.7% of the global total. It releases tens of millions of tons of volatile organic compounds, oxides of carbon, sulfur, and nitrogen into the environment. Oil spills are increasingly becoming the most common environmental hazard that undermines the region's environmental quality. At about 2012, it was estimated that about 3 million barrels of crude oil have been spilled into the Niger Delta environment during the past 65 years, which have destroyed vast mangrove biomes, contaminated surface and groundwater, and introduced carcinogens into the food chain. Rising radiological pollution is another very worrisome trend observed in Niger Delta. Radiation levels of up to 0.016 milliroentgens per hour, which is about 45% higher than normal background, have been recorded in surface waters. Again, alpha and beta activities of up to 16.95 becquerel per liter and 135.88 becquerel per liter respectively have also been recorded in surface waters. Other environmental hazards include coastal and riverbank erosion, nipa palm and water hyacinth invasion, inefficient waste management practices, flooding, etc. These plague the region, and all these environmental hazards acting in collusion have affected not only the livelihood of the people, but have compromised their health and well-being. So that's the summary of different kinds of things that we find happening in the environment of the Niger Delta. I have summed it all that the Niger Delta region is a region of environmental hazards and deteriorating environmental quality. Now, let me quickly just state that when we have environmental hazards almost everywhere that you find in Niger Delta, it has direct impact on the health and well-being of the people. It also indirectly affects their livelihoods because a depressed environment, an environment of deteriorating quality, cannot offer the ecosystem services that it naturally was built to offer. It also means that agricultural productivity will dwindle, fisheries will decrease. That's among the fish stock we have in our rivers will decrease. And you know the people subsist directly on the land and their rivers. So if the agricultural productivity of the land is plummeting, then that means that their agricultural output will be affected. And so this affects their livelihoods. In a similar way, what we find in the rivers. If we have dwindling fish stocks, the fish catches will reduce. So the amount of protein that can be derived from the environment will reduce. All these and so many more is what affects the quality of life in the Niger Delta. So responding to your question, yes, we've been in the forefront of of environmental science and technology in the Niger Delta. And at all times, we try to bring up matters that touch on the state and the quality of the environment in the Niger Delta, which explains the general malaise that we see in our society. People's well-being and welfare, instead of improving, is deteriorating. And this affects every sphere of life, both social, political, economic, and all other spheres of life. Yeah, so that's how I just want to introduce our conversation. Yeah, as academics, our duty is to shine the light on the dark areas of our lives, of our society, right? We are the torchbearers. I know development, civilization begins from a thought. And so the duty of the academic is to expose what is happening in the immediate environment. And that is why you said that a lot of publications and research is going on. The universities, the academics and other researchers are doing their own bit. We usually have what is called research and development. The development aspect of the research is the responsibility of government and other corporate organizations to take on the findings of academics and researchers, right? And then act upon them. But in our own society, it is not as I would say, as it should be. Academics, we spend a lot of time and resources in gathering data, going to the field to make observations, doing your studies, and bringing out your findings. And then after we publish, these papers just hang out there in many shelves. Sometimes they are never read by the people who suffer from this. Then talking about the question you asked, who pays? There's a universal principle grounded in various United Nations protocols, documents and conventions. The polluter pays principle, right? So wherever you find a polluter, the polluter is responsible to pay for the pollution that he has caused. In the Niger Delta, it is without argument that the operations of the oil and gas industry in the Niger Delta has been unconscionably reckless, still reckless till today, right? And so they are the major polluters, and so they should be held to account. The argument in the recent times is that, well, we have third-party interdiction, other non-state actors that are, coming into the oil industry in an illegal form, talking about pipeline vandalization, artisanal refineries, and all that also spill. What I will say, this latest stage of pollution that we are finding is what I would describe as a recent activity in the long history of the oil industry. Because, give or take, we can say that these new, very obnoxious pollution that we are seeing from these other actors, right, is something about 20 or less than 20 years old. But we were talking about the oil industry in the Niger Delta for about 65 plus years. So what happened in the previous 45 years? We have found legacy spills that have devastated various environments that by far outstrips whatever is happening in recent times. So answering your questions, polluters should pay. For illegal activities, again, the responsibility is on government and also on the operators of these oil fields to ensure that their facilities are protected, right? That their facilities are protected so that we don't have easy access to these oil pipelines, oil facilities, and then having them tapped and then the resulting spillages that happen. Sometimes I hear IOCs and even the government try to shift responsibility to community chiefs, community leaders, that they should protect the infrastructure in their domains. Perhaps they do not understand the nature of the terrains. Some of the places where these things happen is far outside the reach of the community leaders. They are in very far remote areas, away from communities, and where these things happen. And they do not have the resources to police the facilities as it ought to be. It is these IOCs who are the beneficiaries, the direct beneficiaries of that business, and also government that should protect. And technology has provided us very cheap means of monitoring oil facilities and pipelines to ensure that they are protected, right? So I will not go far into that because that is away from the focus of our conversation.
Thank you very much. You are an expert in the place, so if we allow you might only talk to the following day. Yeah. So, but let's come to what is very important. You talk about the pollution and the effect has on livelihood, because most of these pollutions basically destroy farmlands, destroy the water bodies where we know most of the communities in Niger Delta, they into fish farming, enter agriculture. But these things are the sources of livelihood. As somebody who has been in this space for a very long time, what is the way forward in restoring the livelihood of these farmers, these fishermen, these communities whose source of livelihood is being affected?
Yeah, well, wherever there is pollution, is that we have contaminants of concern in the environment that interferes with the normal productivity of that environment. And unless and until those contaminants of concern are either removed or contained, you will not have the environment being restored. So what we will say is that yes, wherever there is pollution, they should be remediated. The environment should be restored. If we have, for instance, in most of the estuaries around the Niger Delta, we had the mangrove forests. The mangrove is a very fragile and sensitive ecosystem, okay? And as a result of that, once we have oil spills, which is the most common pollutant or the predominant pollutant that we have in the Niger Delta, once we have that within the environment, then it interferes with the growth of the forest, of the mangrove forest, bringing them under stress. And in most areas, you see mangroves just die off, right? Mangrove ecosystems were spawning grounds and for fishes. Once they are away, that particular service is removed. So, wherever we find pollution, whether be it on land or in water, then there should be remediation. The Bayelsa State government in 2023 released their report on the oil contamination of that environment, or the Bayelsa environment. They have come out with their recommendations, which is also centered about restoration of contaminated lands in Bayelsa State. And like I say, the Niger Delta, the Niger Delta as a whole comprises of about 70,000 square kilometers. But the areas that are within the Tidal region, where we have these mangroves, is about 20,000 square kilometers. Most of these areas. Now think about 20,000 square kilometers. Most of the areas within these 20,000 square kilometers is contaminated. So talking about the remediation and restoration of contaminated lands in the Niger Delta is no joke. If we veer into the Ogoni area, where I have worked extensively, talking about restoration of contaminated lands, Ogoni by size is about 1,000 square kilometers. So if you compare that to the Niger Delta in terms of size, the Niger Delta as a whole is 70,000 square kilometers. Areas that are within the Tidal region, where we have estuaries and mangroves, is about 20,000 square kilometers. If you know the intricacies of the restoration of the Ogoni environment, which is something that I will call a pilot site of remediation, and then what it takes to restore the Ogoni environment, and the length of time it has taken to restore the Ogoni environment, you will know that it's not a tea party, it's not a joke. So this is something that requires the full commitment of the federal government and also the IOCs and now the NOCs, because the IOCs are exiting shore areas and then handing over to NOCs, that is national oil companies. The Niger Delta is the most polluted spot on the planet. And I say that and say it again with conviction because I've been to several parts of the world where you have oil exploration activities. I want to start this point for illustration. In 1989, there was a spill in Alaska. About 240,000 barrels of oil was spilled somewhere in Alaska. And the whole world rose and said, never again should that kind of incident happen anywhere. In 2008, over 540,000 barrels of crude oil was spilled into the Bodo Creek. And it was barely reported in local media. It wasn't even reported internationally until the Bodo people took the matter in their hands and went to court in the UK to hold Shell accountable to this spill. And then, it's still a matter that is ongoing. Why am I bringing out this parallel? We have pollution in the Niger Delta happening almost every day along the vast several kilometers of oil pipelines that crisscross the entire region. When spills happen, we take it lightly, both as citizens and natives of the Niger Delta and our government. Now, talking about the federal government, who is the federal government? The federal government comprises of three arms of government. We have the executive arm and we have the legislature, right? Let's leave the judiciary out for now. These two arms of government, we have our representatives. The Senate President is from the Niger Delta, right? And as a people, and your environment is being damaged, forget about us today. The way in which the Niger Delta environment is being polluted, I'm afraid for what the place will be in the next 20 years. So what is the legacy that we are going to hand over to our children? Just like Dennis Hall said in 1976, that the land is not a resource handed over to us by our forefathers. Rather, it is a resource that we borrowed from our children. So as something that we borrowed from our children, it means that we have to hand over or return to them that which we borrowed. The nature of the environment of the Niger Delta, what are we going to hand over to our children? At least for me, I was a village boy, grew up as a village boy in the village. I know the resources that was provided by the Bodo Estuary, which I enjoyed as a child. I didn't know hunger as a child, right? But the case is not the same today. If my children had to go back there, or when they go back there, what do they find? Nothing. Polluted creeks, which also impact on their own life, on their health and well-being. And so, putting the blames on the federal government is ourselves, both as individuals and as leaders, political leaders, to say, yes, the laws are there that protects this environment, that guides all the activities that take place within the environment. How are they enforced? When there's an oil spill in any community, how does it affect our representatives? That is the voice. Our representatives in parliament is the voice of the people. Do they connect? So, look at the Bayelsa report that just came out. We have representatives from at least 3 senators and so many House of Rep members from Bayelsa State. What is their advocacy? To calling the government and the IOCs, the polluters, to account that, yes, this report has been published. This is what the report is saying at the state of the environment, and these are the recommendations for the implementation of that report.